The following information comes from my novel, The Splitting of the Tree, which is the first book to the War for Achamed trilogy. For context, click the link above and then come back to this video. Thank you and enjoy. The world of Achamed is a vast planet filled with many countries situated upon its sprawling continents that sit alongside an untold number of seas and oceans that dot the world. In particular, the nation of Ergos, within the bounds of the 6 continents, stands out as a major world power. Ergos is a land with small mountain ranges and wide pastures. Its borders extend as far north as the city of Megar and as far south as the Tamiro Strait. Its coasts face the ever-boiling Mabayan Sea, the blue Hashrik Sea, and the expansive Sherendon Sea. Outside the mainland, its capital of Pardis can be found amongst its small strip of territory bordering Sejutan. The country is inhabited mostly by humans and some other sentient creatures as well. Cows and sheep graze upon the grass, and some wolves and foxes live out in the fields as well. But otherwise, nothing foreign or strange inhabits Ergos. Instead, the intrigue and fascination of the country mostly surrounds its ancient history, culture, and philosophy. Its locals are known for being heroic, having an affiliation for the sea and for the past stoic warrior culture during its warring states period. Join me as we uncover the ancient history of Ergos, its peoples, and the great impact it made on its neighbors. In 352 AHE, or after Hellenian Empire formation, the First Hellenian Empire shattered as a result of Alexios failing to name an heir. A remnant of the empire survived in Hellenia, or what is now modern-day Kresk in Valoria, but the rest of the empire was reformed into various new city-states or kingdoms. Such was the case for Ergos. However, back then, Ergos was not one nation, but rather several various scheming city-states and kingdoms. Each city-state had their own patron god, based off of their mythology that they worshipped. Ergosian mythology is rather similar to Hellenian mythology in the sense that it follows a pantheon of scheming gods with terrible moral flaws. These gods are thought to be based off of real human sages that may have lived in Ergos and were wrongfully elevated to the status of gods. But no one can confirm this, as Ergos strangely did not have a large population of magic users back then. Many anthropologists believe that Ergosians naturally have a genetic immunity to magic, while others dispute that claim and believe that they were historically persecuted in the nation. Regardless, these various states would over time come into conflict with each other. As a result of conquest, trade, and short distance, the idea of a unified Ergos emerged as the people occupying these states developed similar cultures, languages, and a deep sense of nationalism. Over time, the idea of a unified Ergosian state became fully realized when the northern state of Megar successfully absorbed the north by either annexing the opposing states, forcing them to swear loyalty, or transforming them into vassal or tributary states. Their patron god was the snake god of war and conquest, Poulimos. Similarly, in the south, from the city of Persai, the Persicans also absorbed the south completely. Their patron god was the god of water, Agua. It was only a matter of time until the two states and their allies would fight. And that is precisely what happened in 676 AHE, when the Persicans launched a sudden attack through the Tilim Pass. The assault failed, and Persica was forced to go on defense when the Megari launched an all-out counterattack to invade and completely subdue the south. One of the worst battles of the war was the sacking of Miltuk, when the Megari rained thousands of arrows alit with flames onto the Persican city before it was completely sacked. The fall of Miltuk gave the Megari open access to the strategic city of Thyses, but instead they decided on marching towards Persai, the capital of Persica, by going along the coast and destroying the Persicans' navy. At this time, Persica had the greatest navy that the ancient world had ever seen. As such, the Megari hoped to humiliate the Persicans into surrender by destroying their pride. The Megari almost succeeded in this endeavor to humiliate the Persicans into defeat, as one by one, Persican generals fled the nation, believing the war to be totally lost. So the Persicans were forced to recruit a lesser-known general by the name of Palmos to carry on the war. Accounts vary wildly on who Palmos was before the war, mainly due to Ergosian bias. Often he is painted as a saint, an underdog, or a part godlike figure who gracefully transformed ancient Ergos into a utopia, according to Ergosian fanatics. But, as always, many debate the validity of these claims. Regardless, Palmos strengthened the will of the Persicans when he ordered the remnant of the navy to attack the captured coastal cities taken by the Megari. As such, the Megari halted their advance and made a fallback line to ensure the reinforcement of their garrisons in the captured coastal cities should there be more naval attacks. But Palmos gave the Megari armies no time to retreat and managed to encircle and subdue a large number of the advance. So much manpower was lost in the encirclement that the Megari and its coalition were forced to abandon the assault into southern Persica altogether and flee back to the Tilim Pass. Their plan was to hold, bleed out Palmos' men, and then launch another counterattack and subdue and annex Persica. But the exact opposite happened, as instead of holding, Palmos punched right through their defenses. The last of the army was completely exposed into wide thymy fields with only a few sparse trees to cover them. The army, however, tried to stand their ground, as outside the fields was the city-state of Edesma, a powerful port city with access to several Megari trade routes. The king of the city of Edesma, Mendax, rode out with his men to reinforce the Megari army. Thus, the famous Battle of Thymy Fields was fought between the Persicans and the Megari. To this day, travelers can still find rusty swords and helmets out in the fields. Now, due to further Ergosian embellishment of history, Mendax is often described as an evil and wicked king. He is described to have taught his horses how to eat human flesh should anyone dare to challenge him. And he was also described to be an expert swordsman. And of course, during the famous Battle of Thymy Fields, Palmos happens to duel Mendax and won. Now, this duel, though greatly exaggerated, most likely actually happened, as Mendax was recorded to have died during the battle at the hands of Palmos. Naturally, this caused all of the kings and queens who had previously supported the Megari to then suddenly swear loyalty to Palmos for fear that they too would be executed in a similar manner as Mendax had. As a result, Palmos' army declared him to be the king of all of Ergos. Naturally, Persica, seeing as they had no generals to oppose Palmos, swore loyalty to him as well. The formation of the first kingdom of Ergos marked a golden age of Ergosian history where the arts flourished. The famous 2 is a dangerous number play was written in this time period in the city of Tarfni, and the play also takes place there as well. The famous philosopher Sager the Wise also rose to prominence in this time period. His philosophical ideals surrounding Ergosian life was recounted in his 2 books, The Ways of Ergos and 14 Rules for Life. The song Days of Kings, which recounts the coalition war and also exaggerates the wars, was also written in this time. It has remained the most popular song in Ergos ever since it was first penned by an unknown musician. Eventually, Palmos would come to die, and several other kings would come after him. Ergos' history at this time would fade to obscurity, as the first kingdom of Ergos did not make any attempts to extend their borders, but instead pursued isolation. Unfortunately, in 846 AHE, the first kingdom of Ergos was invaded and annexed by the Second Hellenian Empire. Ergos stood no chance as it had demobilized its army and it had no means to combat the Hellenian sages. Despite being absorbed into the Hellenian Empire, Ergos' stoic ideals and culture lived on, and much of its cultural values were actually absorbed in Hellenian culture as well. Even the Ergosian mythology of gods was incorporated into Hellenia's pantheon of gods. For now, Ergos was a subject of the Hellenian Empire, but one day it would break free from the shackles of imperialism and spread its wings once again. Join me next time as we recount the history of Ergos during the days of the Helgos Empire, its terrible fall, and the beginning of the Third Great Magic War in The History of Ergos, Part 2.